At 4 a.m., as Boston lay quiet under the night sky, a shadowy force swept in without a sound, changing everything instantly. ICE teams slipped through the darkness with no lights or sirens, acting like soldiers on a secret mission, and they hit University. Dorms hard. In places like Boston University and East Boston neighborhoods, doors flew open. Young people got pulled from their beds in handcuffs, and soon almost 1,500 folks disappeared into custody. Over just a month, authorities labeled it Operation Patriot. Yet, for those left behind on campus, it seemed more like an invasion that no one saw coming. What drove this dawn strike, and who truly ended up in the vans, now hangs over the city, sparking fear and questions about what might strike next. Let's explore. With Navy secrets. In the quiet hours before dawn in May 2005, Boston became the stage for a stunning immigration crackdown that left communities reeling. ICE launched a sweeping operation known as Operation Patriot, targeting universities and residential areas across the city, detaining nearly 1,500 people in just 1 month. This bold move hit places like Boston University, MIT, and neighborhoods like Chelsea and South Bay, catching residents off guard with its speed and scale. The raids, executed with military-like precision, sparked heated debates about security rights and the role of universities in America's immigration battles. Yet, the full scope of this operation raises questions about its actual targets and lasting impact, setting the stage for a deeper look into how it unfolded. Operation Patriot began in the darkness with ICE agents moving swiftly through Boston streets to surround key locations. At Boston University, teams entered dormitories at 4 a.m., securing hallways and stairwells before students could react. In Chelsea, a working-class neighborhood, agents targeted apartment complexes housing many international residents. Unlike typical immigration checks, these raids were highly coordinated, using detailed plans to avoid detection. For example, in a single week in March 2025, ICE detained 370 people across these sites, a number that grew to 1,500 by June, according to official ICE reports. This rapid pace showed a clear intent to overwhelm and outmaneuver any resistance. The operation's focus was not random, as it zeroed in on areas with large international student and immigrant populations. At MIT, agents swept through graduate housing, targeting those in high-demand STEM fields. In South Bay, residential blocks saw similar action, with entire families sometimes detained. The scale was staggering as ICE moved beyond traditional targets, like undocumented workers, to include students with valid visas. A video from a local news outlet captured agents escorting residents from a Newton apartment complex, their hands bound as neighbors watched in shock. This broad approach signaled a shift in enforcement strategy, prioritizing speed and volume over precision. Operation Patriot's reliance on secrecy and surprise made it stand out, leaving little room for response. Agents arrived without flashing lights, using night vision tools to navigate quietly. As reported by WBUR, this ensured that detentions were already underway when communities realized what was happening. For instance, at this university, a graduate student named Aisha Khan was pulled from her dorm during a study session. Unaware of the operation until agents were at her door, her case, reported by the Boston Globe, highlighted how quickly lives were upended with no chance to contact familiar legal help. Of the 1,500 detained, over half were caught in these pre-dawn sweeps, a tactic designed to prevent escapes or protests. The operation's reach extended beyond university campuses, hitting residential areas with equal force. In East Boston, a hub for immigrant families, ICE targeted multi-unit buildings, detaining both documented and undocumented residents. A CBS News report noted that these raids included individuals and entire households, disrupting community networks. For example, a family of 4 in Chelsea was detained despite having no criminal history. Local advocates later highlighted their case. The sheer number of detentions, 1,500 in a single month, underscored ISIS's aggressive approach, surpassing typical enforcement actions in the region. This massive operation drew from a playbook of calculated efficiency, reflecting ISIS's broader goals under the Trump administration. The agency claimed Operation Patriot was data-driven, targeting specific individuals based on intelligence gathered over months, however, including students and familiars with clean records raised doubts. A booth operations focus, a leaked memo in the original transcript suggested used university records to pinpoint targets, a move that sparked outrage among educators. According to Todd's data, by June 2025, the operation had detained people from over 20 countries, with a notable focus on those from Asia and Latin America. This wide net fueled debates about whether the raids were truly about security or something else entirely. The human cost of these raids was immediate, and visibly communities grappled with the sudden loss of neighbors and classmates. At Boston University, lecture halls sat empty as students feared attending classes, a trend echoed at MIT and other schools. Local reports noted a 10% drop in campus attendance in the weeks following the raids, as fear spread among international students. One student quoted in a WER interview described hiding in their dorm for days, unsure if they would be next. These stories painted a picture of a city on edge where trust in institutions, like universities, began to erode under the weight of federal enforcement. Operation Patriot scale and execution were meant to send a message, but also raised questions about fairness and intent. While ICE touted the operation as a win for public safety, the broad sweep of detentions suggested a more complex agenda, the targeting of university students, many in critical STEM fields, hinted at a strategy to national security concerns. Thought details remain scarce. As Boston reels from the shock, the methods behind these raids, swift, silent, and sweeping, demand a closer look how they were carried out and what they mean for the future. The next question is how ICE managed such precision and whether their tactics crossed lines that could reshape America's campuses and communities. The ICE raids in Boston, known as Operation Patriot, ignited a firestorm of conflicting reactions across the city and beyond. Supporters hailed the operation as a vital step to enforce immigration laws, while critics condemned it as an extreme overreact that trampled academic freedom and sparked widespread protests. This clash of views split communities, fueled by the operation's massive scale of nearly 1,500 detentions in just 1 month. The debate revealed deep divisions over security, rights, and the role of universities, turning Boston into a flashpoint for national immigration battles. As tensions rose, the city's response set the stage for a broader reckoning with actions. On one side, those backing the raids saw them as a necessary crackdown on long-ignored immigration violations. Law enforcement leaders argued that the operation restored order by targeting individuals who posed risks to public safety. At a press conference in early June 2025, U.S. Attorney Leah Foley praised ICE for its bold move, stating that the raids were critical to upholding the rule of law. She pointed to the AY's data, which out that 790 of the 1,500 detained had prior criminal convictions, including ties to violent gangs and drug networks in areas like Chelsea. For supporters, this justified the operation's intensity, proving that was tackling real threats within communities. Local police officials echoed the sentiment, emphasizing the need for decisive action. They highlighted cases where ICE detained members of organized crime groups operating in Boston suburbs, such as a fentanyl trafficking ring uncovered in South Boston. Posts on social media amplified this view, with users praising the operation for cleaning up neighborhoods they felt had been overlooked. The sentiment was clear. After years of perceived leniency, the raids were a strong signal that immigration laws would no longer be ignored, especially in a city known for its sanctuary policies. However, the other side of the debate painted a starkly different picture, viewing the raids as a brutal assault on civil liberties. Immigrant advocates, professors, and students labeled the operation as a politically driven campaign to silence dissent and intimidate vulnerable groups. Senator Elizabeth Warren, speaking at Early, warned that ISIS's action threatened the core principles of free expression, particularly on university campus. She argued that targeting students, many of whom held valid visas, was not about safety, but about sending a chilling message to academic communities. Protests erupted almost immediately after the raids began, with hundreds taking to the streets. On June 7, 2025, a crowd of 500 gathered outside Boston State House, waving signs demanding justice and transparency. Students from MIT and Boston University joined immigrant families, their voice amplified by megaphones as they shared stories of friends detained without warning. Videos from Waltham showing agents leading handcuffed students from dorms spread rapidly online, racking up thousands of views and fueling outrage. These images became a rallying cry, pushing protests to other cities, like Cambridge and Worcester. The academic community felt particularly battered, as universities had long been considered safe havens for free thought. Faculty members from Tufts and Emerson College issued statements condemning the raids, arguing that they undermined the pursuit of knowledge by creating fear among international students. A petition started by a Boston University student group gathered 15,000 signatures in just 3 days, calling for an end to what they described as militarized enforcement on campuses. The petition highlighted cases like that of a Brazilian chemistry student detained during a lab session despite having no criminal record. This wave of dissent was emotional and organized, with legal groups stepping in to challenge methods. The ACLU of Massachusetts announced plans to file lawsuits, claiming the raids violated due process rights. Their legal team pointed to instances where detainees were held without access to lawyers, a practice they argued was unconstitutional. Immigration attorneys also noted that many of those detained were graduate students in fields like engineering, raising concerns that the operation targeted talent critical to America's innovation economy. Social media became a battleground for these opposing views, with hashtags trending as users debated the raid's merits. One post viewed over 50,000 times showed a student being escorted from a dormitory captioned with a plea for compassion. In contrast, other posts celebrated ISIS's efficiency, arguing that the agency protected communities from potential threats. This digital divide mirrored their real-world tension, as Boston's streets buzzed with rallies and counter-rallies, each side digging in deeper. The protests also highlighted a broader fear that the raids were reshaping the social fabric of academic institutions. Students began avoiding classes, with some schools reporting a 12% drop in attendance as fears spread. Community centers in East Boston saw fewer visitors as families worried about being targeted during routine activities. The raids, meant to restore order, instead sowed distrust, leaving many questioning whether universities could still be places of open dialogue. This polarized response underscored a critical reality. Operation Patriot was not just about immigration enforcement, but about power and perception. Supporters saw it as a triumph of law, while critics viewed it as a deliberate attack on academic freedom and immigrant rights. The divide fueled a growing sense of unease as both sides braced for what it might do next. As the protest grew louder and legal battles loomed, questions emerged about whether universities enabled these raids, a controversy that would soon take center stage. The ICE raids in Boston left a haunting mark on the city's universities and communities, transforming vibrant campuses into spaces of fear and emptiness. Operation Patriot, with its swift detention of nearly 1,500 people in a single month, created scenes of deserted classrooms, abandoned dorms, and families cut off from loved ones, sending shockwaves of anxiety across American universities. The social fabric of academic life unraveled as students vanished without warning, leaving behind laptops open and lives disrupted. This widespread unease altered daily routines and raised questions about the future of trust in educational institutions. As fear took root, the raid's more profound impact on society became impossible to ignore, setting the stage for a broader reckoning. The immediate aftermath of the raids painted a stark picture of absence. At Boston University, once buzzing with debate, lecture halls fell quiet, with rows of empty seats replacing lively discussions. Dormitories at MIT and Tufts stood frozen in time, with books left open and personal belongings untouched, as if their owners might return at any moment. A student at Emerson College described finding her roommate's room untouched after her detention, with no textile pinned to a bulletin board. The eerie stillness became a powerful symbol of the raid's reach, affecting those detained and entire communities who witnessed the sudden void. The human toll was most evident in the stories of severed connections. Families across the globe faced agonizing silence as their children stopped answering calls. In one case, a Mexican family in Guadalajara waited 2 weeks to learn their son, a biology major at Northeastern University, had been detained during a late-night raid. His mother, quoted in a local news report, said she called his phone daily only to hear it ring unanswered. Such stories multiplied, with dozens of parents contacting university counselors and consulates, desperate for answers that rarely came. The lack of communication and the trauma, leaving families to grapple with uncertainty. This disruption extended beyond personal loss to the very rhythm of campus life. Universities reported sharp declines in attendance, with Emerson College noting a 15% drop in class participation in few weeks following the raids. International students began skipping seminars at Boston University, fearing they could be next. Some turned off location tracking on their phones or avoided campus Wi-Fi, wary of surveillance. A mid-student organization survey found that 20% of international students were considering transfer to schools in states with less aggressive enforcement, such as California. This shift signaled a growing distrust in the safety of academic spaces. The fear was not limited to international students. Domestic students also felt the weight of the raids changing how they interacted with peers. Class discussions grew cautious with fewer hands raised and less open debate. A professor at TIS noted that group projects suffered as students hesitated to collaborate with international classmates and worried about drawing attention. Counseling centers saw a surge in appointments, with many students seeking help not for direct involvement, but for anxiety about the campus climate. One counselor reported a 25% increase in requests for support, reflecting a broader sense of unease. Communities beyond campuses also felt the impact. In East Boston, a neighborhood with a large immigrant population, local businesses reported fewer customers as residents avoided public spaces. Community centers, once hubs for after-school programs, saw attendance plummet as parents kept children home. A local pastor described families skipping Sunday services, fearing it might target gatherings. This retreat from public life eroded the sense of belonging that had defined these neighborhoods, replacing it with suspicion and isolation. Students and families responded by organizing, seeking ways to reclaim agency. Online forums emerged, connecting detained students' parents with legal aid groups. A WhatsApp group for Boston area families grew to over 300 members sharing updates and resources. Universities caught off guard issued guidelines to help students navigate encounters with law enforcement. Northeastern University distributed fleas outlining rights, urging students always to carry identification. Yet these measures often felt like bandages in a deeper wound, as the absence of detained students left a lasting mark. The raid's social consequences extended the perception of universities as safe havens. Students, who once viewed campuses as places of opportunity, now saw them as potential traps. A sophomore at Boston University told a student newspaper she no longer felt secure attending night classes, fearing unionist raids. This shift in perception threatened the core mission of higher education, where an inquiry depends on a sense of security. Faculty members began questioning whether they could protect their students, with some organizing teachings to discuss immigration rights. Data underscored the scale of this disruption. A report from a Boston-based immigrant advocacy group noted that 30% of international students surveyed in June 2025 were reconsidering their plans to study in the U.S. This came at a time when American universities relied heavily on global talent, particularly in STEM fields, where international students made up nearly half of graduate programs. The potential loss of this talent raised alarms about long-term impacts on research and innovation, with some professors warning of delays in critical projects. The raids also sparked a broader national conversation. Student newspapers from coast to coast published editorials questioning the balance between security and freedom. At Columbia University, a solidarity rally drew to 100 participants after reports of similar ICE actions in New York. The fear of escalation was palpable, with students at schools like UCLA and the University of Michigan forming rapid response networks to monitor enforcement activity. These efforts showed a growing awareness that Boston's experience could become a national trend. As communities grappled with these changes, the raid's message lingered. No place was beyond reach. This new reality forced students, families, and educators to navigate a landscape of uncertainty where the line between safety and vulnerability blurred. The social fallout raised a critical question. How did universities, meant to be bastions of learning, become complicit in such a sweeping operation? The answer lies in the quiet coordination behind the scenes. A controversy that would soon demand accountability. Operation Patriot in Boston was not just an immigration crackdown. It sent a bold message about border security while igniting fierce debates over human rights and academic freedom. The raids, detaining nearly 1,500 people in a single month, reshaped communities, campuses, and the national conversation on enforcement. They exposed deep tensions between law, liberty, and the role of universities, leaving a legacy of fear, division, and uncertainty as America grapples with these events. The operation's fallout points to a future of escalating conflict and tough choices. The scale of the raids was staggering, with 1,500 individuals, including 790 with criminal records, detained across Massachusetts in May and June 2025. Yet, including visa-holding STEM students sparked outrage as many saw it as a misuse of power. Supporters like federal officials celebrated the operation as a necessary step to secure borders, pointing to gang members and drug traffickers among the detained. Critics, including the ACLU, countered that targeting students with clean records eroded trust in institutions, fueling lawsuits and Senate inquiries. The contrast painted a stark picture of a nation split over balancing safety and fairness. Campuses became battlegrounds of emotion and ideology. Empty lecture halls and abandoned dorms at Boston University and MIT reflected a growing fear that silenced vibrant academic communities. Families unable to reach loved ones faced heartbreak, while students avoided classes with attendance dropping by up to 15% at some schools. Protests swelled, with 500 demonstrators rally at Boston State House, their voices echoing in cities like Chicago. These reactions showed how deeply the raids disrupted lives and the idea of universities as safe spaces for learning. The operation's ripple effects hint at a challenging road ahead. ICS plan to hire 10,000 new agents and aim for 3,000 daily arrests suggests more cities like Los Angeles and Chicago could face similar sweeps. Experts predict a 20 to 30% drop in international STEM enrollment, threatening America's edging innovation. Sanctuary cities like Boston may resist, sparking legal battles with federal authorities. If these tensions grow, nationwide protests and court cases school dominate 2025, especially if cases of non-criminal detentions multiply. The political divide will likely deepen, with lawmakers facing pressure to define more precise boundaries for enforcement. Boston's raids may mark a turning point, forcing America to confront hard questions about governance, rights, and education. As trust in institutions wanes and fear lingers, the choice made now will shape the nation's future. From campus halls to courtrooms,